it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. The bodies had broken into pieces, as though they'd been made of glass. Cold Light by Captain S. P. Meek. Damn it, Carnes. I'm on my vacation. I know it, Doctor, and I hate to disturb you, but I felt that I simply had to. I have one of the weirdest cases on my hands that I've ever been mixed up in. And, well, I think you'll forgive me for calling when I tell you about it. Dr. Bird groaned into the telephone. I took a vacation last summer, tried to. You hauled me away from the best fishing I've found in years to help you on a case. This year I've traveled all the way from Washington to San Francisco to get away from you, and the very day that I get here, you're after me. Oh, I won't have anything to do with it. Where are you, anyway? I'm at Fallon, Nevada, Doctor. I'm sorry that you won't help me out because the case promises to be unusually interesting. Hey, let me tell you about it at least. Dr. Bird groaned louder than ever into the telephone. All right, go ahead and tell me about it, if it'll relieve your mind. But I've given you my final answer. I am not a bit interested in it. That's quite all right, Doctor. Don't expect you to touch it. I hope, however, that you'll be able to give me an idea of where to start. So, did you ever see a man's body broken in pieces? You mean badly smashed up? No, indeed I mean just what I said. Broken in pieces. Legs snapped off as though the entire flesh had become brittle. No, I haven't. Neither did anyone else. Well, I've seen it, Doctor. What have you been drinking? Operative Carnes of the United States Secret Service chuckles softly to himself. The voice of the famous scientist of the Bureau of Standards plainly showed an interest which was quite at variance with the words he'd spoken. Oh, I was quite sober, Doctor. So was Hughes. We both saw it. Who is Hughes? Well, he's an airmail pilot. One of the crack flyers of the Transcontinental Airmail Corporation. Hey, why don't I tell you the whole thing in order? All right. I do have a few minutes to spare, but I'll warn you again that I don't intend to touch this case. Yeah, suit yourself, Doctor. Well, I have no authority to requisition your services. As you know, the TAC has been handling a great deal of transcontinental airmail with a pretty clean record on accidents. Day before yesterday, a special plane left Washington to carry 2 packages from there to San Francisco. One of them was a shipment of jewels valued at $250,000, consigned to a San Francisco firm, and the other was a sealed packet from the War Department. No one was supposed to know the contents of that packet except the Chief of Staff, who delivered it to the plane personally. But rumors got out, as usual, and it was popularly supposed to contain certain essential features of the Army's war plans. Well, this much is certain. The plane carried not only the regular TAC pilot and courier, but also an Army courier, and it was guarded during the trip by an Army plane armed with small bombs and a machine gun. And you know what? I rode in it. My orders were simply to guard the ship until it landed at Mills Field, then to guard the courier from there to the Presidio of San Francisco until his packet was delivered personally into the hands of the commanding general of the 9th Corps area. Well, the trip was quiet and monotonous until after we left Salt Lake City at dawn this morning. Nothing happened until we were about 100 miles east of Reno. We'd taken elevation to cross the Stillwater Mountains and were skimming low over them, my plane trailing the TAC plane by about a half a mile. I wasn't paying any particular attention to the other ship when I suddenly felt our plane leap ahead. Well, it was a fast one, and the pilot gave it the gun and made it move, I can tell. I yelled into my phone, asked him what the reason was. The pilot yelled back that the plane ahead was in trouble. Now, as soon as it was called to my attention, I could see myself that it wasn't acting normally. It was losing elevation and was pursuing a very erratic course. Before we could reach it, it lost flying speed and fell into a spinning nosedive and headed for the ground. Well, I watched, expecting every minute to see the crew make parachute jumps, but they didn't, and the plane hit the ground with a terrific crash. It caught fire, I suppose. No, Doctor. That's one of the funny things about the accident. It didn't. It hit the ground in an open place free from brush and literally just burst into pieces. But it didn't flame up. We headed directly for the scene of the crash, and we encountered another funny thing. We almost froze to death. What do you mean? Well, exactly what I say. Well, of course, it's pretty cold at that altitude all the time, but this cold was like nothing I'd ever encountered. It seemed to freeze the blood in our veins, and it congealed frost on the windshields, and it made the motor miss for a moment. It was only momentary, and it only existed directly over the wrecked plane. We went past it and swung around in a circle and came back over the wreck. But we didn't feel that cold again. Next thing we tried to do was find a landing place. And that country is pretty rugged and rough, and there wasn't a flat place for miles that was large enough to land a ship on. Hughes and I talked it over. There didn't seem to be much of anything that we could do except to go on until we found a landing place. I had no experience in parachute jumping, and I couldn't pilot the plane if Hughes jumped. So we swooped down over the wreck as close as we dared, and that was when we saw the condition of the bodies. The whole plane was cracked up pretty badly, but the weird part of it was the fact that the bodies of the crew had broken into pieces, as though they'd been made of glass. Arms and legs were detached from the torsos and lying at a distance. There was no sign of blood on the ground. We saw all this with our naked eyes from close at hand, and verified it by observations through binoculars from a greater height. And when we'd made our observations and marked the location of the wreck as closely as we could, we headed east until we found a landing place near Fallon. Hughes dropped me here and went on to Reno, or to San Francisco if necessary, to report the accident and get more planes to aid in the search. Well, I had no idea as to what to do, but, well, it seemed to be in your line, and as I knew you were at St. Francis, I called you up. Tell me, what are your plans now? Well, I made none until I talked to you. The country where the wreck occurred is unbelievably wild, and we can't get near it with any transportation other than burros. The only thing that I can see to do is to gather together what transportation I can and head for the wreck on foot to rescue the packets and to bring out the bodies. So, can you suggest anything better? Tell me, when do you expect to start? Well, as soon as I can get my pack train together. Possibly in 3 to 4 hours. Lawrence, tell me, are you sure that those bodies were broken into pieces? An arm or a leg might easily be torn off in a complete crash. No, they were smashed into bits as nearly as I could tell, Doc. Hughes is an old-time flyer, and he's seen plenty of crashes, but he's never saw anything like this. It beats anything that I ever saw, too. If your observations were accurate, there could be only one cause, and that one is a patent impossibility. I haven't got any equipment with me, but I expect that I can get most of the stuff that I want from the University of California across the bay at Berkeley. I can get a plane at Crizzy Field. Here, I'll tell you what to do, Carnes. Get your burro train together. Start as soon as you can. But leave me a half dozen burros and a guide at Fallon. I'll get up there as soon as I can, and I'll try to overtake you before you get to the wreck. And if I don't, please don't disturb anything any more than you can help until my arrival. Do you understand? I thought you were on your vacation, Doctor. Shut up, will you? Like most of my vacations, this one will have to be postponed. I'll move as swiftly as I can. I ought to be at Fallon tonight if I'm lucky, and don't run into any obstacles. Burros are fairly slow, but I'll make the best time possible. Well, I rather expected you would, Doctor. Look, I can't pack my train together until this evening, so I'll wait for you right here. And hey, I'm really glad that you're going to get in on it. Part 2. Silently, Carnes and Dr. Bird surveyed the wreck of the TAC plane. The observations of the Secret Service operative had been correct. The bodies of the unfortunate crew had been broken into fragments. Their limbs had not been twisted off as a freak of the fall, but had been cleanly broken off, as though the bodies had suddenly become brittle and shattered on their impact with the ground. Not only the bodies, but the ship itself had been broken up. Even the clothing of the men was in pieces or had long splits in the fabric, whose edges were as clean as though they'd been cut with a knife. Dr. Bird picked up an arm which had belonged to the pilot and examined it. Oh, the brittleness, if it had ever existed, was gone now, and the arm was limp. No rigor mortis, commented the doctor. How long ago was the wreck? About 72 hours ago. What about those packets that were on the plane? Khan stepped forward and gingerly inspected first the body of the army courier, and then that of the courier of the TAC. Both gone, Doctor, he reported, straightening up. Dr. Bird's face fell into grim lines. Well, there's more to this case than appears on the surface, Carnes, he said. This was no ordinary wreck. I'll bring up that third burro. I want to examine these fragments a little. He then went on to one of the two guides who had accompanied them from Fallon. You and Wallace scout around the ground and see what you can find out. I especially wish to know whether anyone had visited the scene of the wreck. The guides consulted a moment and then started on their way. Carnes drove up the burro the doctor had indicated, and Dr. Bird unpacked it. He opened a mahogany case and took from it a high-powered microscope. Setting the instrument up on a convenient rock, he subjected portions of the wreck, including several fragments of flesh, to careful scrutiny. When he completed his observations, he fell into a brown study, from which he was aroused by Carnes. What did you find out about the cause of the wreck, Doctor? I don't know what to think. The immediate cause was that everything was frozen. The plane ran into a belt of cold which froze up the motor, which probably killed the crew instantly. It was undoubtedly the aftermath of that cold which you felt when you swooped down over the wreck. Yeah, but it seems impossible that it could have gotten cold enough to freeze everything up like that. Yeah, it does. Yet I'm confident that that's what happened. It was no ordinary cold, Carnes. It was cold of the type that infests interstellar space. Cold beyond any conception you have of cold. Cold near the range of the absolute zero of temperature, nearly 450 degrees below zero on the Fahrenheit scale. At such temperatures, things which are ordinarily quite flexible and elastic, such as rubber or flesh, become as brittle as glass and would break in the manner which these bodies have broken. An examination of the tissues of the flesh shows that it has been submitted to some temperatures very low in the scale, probably below that of liquid air. Such a temperature would produce instant death and the other phenomena which we can observe here. Yeah, but what could cause such a low temperature, Doctor? Well, that I don't know yet, although I do hope to find out before we're finished. Cold is a funny thing, Carnes. Ordinarily, it's considered as simply the absence of heat, yet I've always held it to be a definite negative quantity. All through nature we observe that every force has its opposite or negative force to oppose it. We have positive and negative electrical charges, positive and negative or north and south magnetic poles. We have gravity and its opposite apergy, and I believe cold is really negative heat. Well, I never heard of anything like that, Doctor. I always thought that things were cold because heat was taken from them, not because cold was added. It sounds preposterous. Such is the common idea, and yet I cannot accept it, for it does not explain all the recorded phenomena. You are familiar with the searchlight, are you not? Well, in a general way, yeah. Well, a searchlight is merely a source of light, and, of course, of heat, which is placed at the focus of a parabolic reflector so that all of the rays emanating from the source travel in parallel lines. A searchlight, of course, gives off heat. If we place a lens of the same size as the searchlight aperture in the path of the beam and concentrate all the light and heat at one spot, the focal point of the lens, the temperature at that point is the same as the temperature of the source of the light, less what has been lost by radiation. You understand that, do you not? Why, certainly. Now, suppose that we place at the center of the aperture of the searchlight a small opaque disc, which is permeable neither to heat nor light, in such a manner as to interrupt the central portion of the beam. As a result, the beam will go out in the form of a hollow rod or pipe of heat and light with a dark, cold core. This core will have the temperature of the surrounding air plus the small amount which was radiated into it from the surrounding pipe. If we now pass this beam of light through a lens in order to concentrate the beam, both the pipe of heat and the cold core will focus. If we place a temperature measuring device near the focus of the dark core, we'll find that the temperature is lower than the surrounding air. And this means that we have focused, or rather concentrated, the cold. It sounds impossible, but, well, I can offer no other criticism. Nevertheless, it is experimentally true. It's one of the facts which lead me to consider cold as negative heat. However, this is true of cold, as it is of the other negative forces. They exist and manifest themselves only in the presence of the positive forces. No one has yet concentrated cold except in the presence of heat, as I have outlined to you. How this cold belt which the TAC plane encountered came to be there is another question indeed. The thing which we have to determine is whether it was caused by natural or artificial forces. Both of the packets which the plane carried are gone, Doctor, observed Carnes. Yeah. That seems to add weight to the possibility that the cause was artificial, but it's far from conclusive. The packets might not have been on the men when the plane fell, or someone may have passed later and taken them for safekeeping. The doctor's remarks here were interrupted by the guides. Someone's been out here since the wreck, Doctor, said Bill. Warder and I found tracks where 2 men came up here and prowled around for some time, and left by the way they came. They went off toward the northwest. We followed their trail for about 40 rods, then we lost it. We weren't able to pick it up again. Well, thanks, Bill, replied the doctor. Well, Carnes, that seems to add more weight to the theory that the spot of cold was made, and it didn't just happen naturally. If a prospecting party had just happened along, they would either have left the wreck alone, or they would have made some attempt to intern the bodies. That cold belt must have been produced artificially by men who planned to rob this plane after bringing it down, and who were nearby to get their plunder. So, is there any chance of following that trail? I doubt it, Doc. No, Waller and I scouted around quite a lot. We couldn't pick it up again. Is there any power line passing within 20 miles of here? Oh, none that Waller and I know of, Doc. Funny. Such a device as must have been used would need power, and lots of it for operation. Well, I'll try my luck. Carnes, help me unpack and set up the rest of my apparatus. With the aid of the operative, Dr. Bird unpacked 2 of the bureaus and extracted from cases, where they were carefully packed and padded, some elaborate electrical and optical apparatus. The first was a short telescope of large diameter, which he mounted on a base in such a manner that it could be elevated or depressed and rotated in any direction. At the focal point of the telescope was fastened a small knot of wire, from which one lead ran into the main piece of the apparatus, which he'd sat on a flat rock. The other lead from the wire knot ran into a sealed container surrounded by a water bath, under which a spirit lamp burned. From the container, another lead led to the main apparatus. This main piece consisted of a series of wire coils mounted on a frame and attached to the 2 leads. The doctor took from a padded case a tiny magnet suspended on a piece of wire of exceedingly small diameter, which he fastened in place inside the coils. Cemented to the magnet was a tiny mirror. Hey, what is that apparatus? Asked Carnes as the doctor finished his setup and surveyed it with satisfaction. Merely a thermocouple attached to a Dark valve galvanometer, replied the doctor. This large squat telescope catches and concentrates on the thermocouple, and the galvanometer registers the temperature. Whew, you're way out of my depth here. What's a thermocouple? A juncture of two wires made of dissimilar metals, in this case of platinum and of platinum-iridium alloy. There's another similar junction in this case, which is kept at a constant temperature by the water bath. When the temperatures of the two junctions are the same, the system is in equilibrium. When there are different temperatures, an electrical potential is set up, which causes a current to flow from one to the other through the galvanometer. The galvanometer consists of a magnet set up inside coils through which the current I spoke of flows. This current causes the magnet to rotate, and by watching the mirror, the rotation can be detected and measured. Now, this device is one of the most sensitive ever made, and is used to measure the radiation from distant stars. Currents as small as you can imagine have been detected and measured. This particular instrument is not that sensitive to begin with, and has its sensitivity further reduced by having a high resistance in one of the leads. So, what are you going to use it for? I'm hoping to try and locate somewhere in these hills a patch of local coal. It may not work, but I have hopes. If you'll manipulate the telescope so as to search the hills around here, I'll watch the galvanometer. Part 3. For several minutes, Carnes swung the telescope around. Twice, Dr. Bird stopped him and decreased the sensitiveness of his instrument by introducing more resistance in the lines in order to keep the magnet from twisting clear around, due to the fluctuations in the heats received on account of the varying conditions of reflection. As Carnes swung the telescope again, the magnet swung around sharply, nearly to a right angle to its former position. "Stop!" cried the doctor. "Now, read your device." Carnes read the compass bearing on the protractor attached to the frame which supported the telescope. Dr. Bird took a pair of binoculars and looked long and earnestly in the indicated direction. With a sigh, he laid down the glasses. "Now, I can't see a thing, Carnesy," he said. "We'll have to move over to the next crest and make a new setup. Plant it right on the hill so we can get a compass bearing and get the airline distance with a rangefinder." On the hilltop which Dr. Bird had pointed out, the apparatus was again set up. For several minutes, Carnes swept the hills before an exclamation from the doctor told him to pause. He checked the new reading, and the doctor laid off the two readings on a sheet of paper with a protractor and made a few calculations. "I don't know," he said reflectively when he'd finished his computations. "This damn instrument is still so sensitive that you may have merely focused on a deep shadow or a cold spring or something of that sort. But the magnet kicked clear around, and it may mean that we've located what we were looking for. It should be about 2 miles away, almost due west of here." "Well, there's no spring that I know of, Doc, and I think I know every waterhole in this country," remarked Bill. "It could hardly be a spring at this elevation anyway," replied the doctor. "Maybe it is what we're seeking. We'll start out in that direction anyway. Bill, you'd better take the lead, for you know the country. Spread out a little so we won't be too bunched if anything happens." For 3/4 of an hour, the little group of men made their way through the wilderness in the direction indicated by the doctor. Presently, Bill, who was in the lead, held up his hand with a warning gesture. The other 3 closed up as rapidly as cautious progress would allow. "What is it, Bill?" asked the doctor in an undertone. "I'll slip up ahead and look over that crest." The doctor obeyed the instructions. As he glanced over, he gave vent to a low whistle of surprise, a motion for Carnes to join him. The operative crawled up and glanced over the crest. In a hollow before them was a crude one-storied house, and directed on an open space before it was a massive piece of apparatus. It consisted of a large number of huge metallic cylinders, from which lines ran to a silvery concave mirror mounted on an elaborate frame which would allow it to be rotated so as to point in any direction. "Hey, what is it?" whispered Carnes. "It's some kind of a projector," muttered the doctor. "Never seen one quite like it, but it's meant to project something. Can't make out the curve of that mirror. It isn't a parabola, and it isn't an ellipse. Must be a high-degree subcatenary, or else building a transcendental function." He then raised himself to get a clearer view, and as he did so, a puff of smoke came from the house, to be followed in a moment by a sharp crack as a bullet flattened itself a few inches from his head. The doctor tumbled back over the crest out of sight of the house. Bill and Walter hurried forward, their rifles held ready for action. "Right, get out on the flanks, man," directed the doctor. "The man we want is in a house on that hollow. He's armed, and he means business." Bill and Walter crawled under the shelter of the rocks to a short distance away, and then, rifles ready, advanced to the attack. A report came from the hollow, and a bullet whined over Bill's head. Then almost instantly a crack came from Walter's rifle, and splinters flew from the building in the hollow a few inches from a loophole, through which projected the barrel of a rifle. The rifle barrel swung rapidly in a circle, and barked in Walter's direction. But as it did so, Bill's gun spoke, and again splinters flew from the building. "Good work," said Dr. Bird, as he watched the slow advance of the two guides. If we just had rifles, we could join in the party, but we're a little too far away for effective pistol work. Right, let's go ahead. We may get close enough to do a little shooting ourselves." Pistols in hand, Carnes and the doctor crawled over the crest and joined in the advance. Again and again the rifle spoke from the hollow and was answered by the vicious barks of the rifles in the hands of the guides, Carnes and the doctor resting their pistols on rocks and sending an occasional bullet toward the loophole. The conditions of light and the moving target were not conducive to making good marksmanship on the part of the besieged man, and none of the attackers were hit. Quickly, Walter succeeded in sending a bullet through the loophole. The rifle barrel suddenly disappeared. With a shout, the four men rose from their cover and advanced toward the building at a run. As they did so, an ominous whirring sound came from the apparatus in front of the house, and a sudden chill filled the air. "Back!" shouted Dr. Bird. "Back below the hill if you value your lives." He then turned and raced at full speed toward the sheltering crest of the hill, the others following him closely. The whirring sound continued, and the concave reflector turned with a grating sound on its gears. As the path of its rays struck the ground, the rocks became white with frost, and one rock split with a sharp report, one fragment rolling down the slope, carrying others in its trail. With panic-stricken faces, the four men raced toward the sheltering crest, but remorselessly the reflector swung around in their direction. The intense cold numbed the racing men, cutting off their breath and impeding their efforts for speed. "Stop!" cried the doctor suddenly. "Right, fire at that reflector. It's our only chance." He then set the example by turning and emptying his pistol futilely at the turning mirror. Bill, Walter, and Carnes all followed his example. But nearer and nearer to them came the deadly ray. Bill was the nearest to its path, and he suddenly stiffened and fell forward, his useless gun still grasped in his hands. As his body struck the ground, it rolled down the hill for a few feet, the deadly ray following it. Then his head struck a rock, and Carnes gave out a cry of horror as it smashed into fragments. Walter threw his rifle to his shoulder and fired again and again at the rotating disc. The cold had become intense, and he couldn't control the actions of his muscles, and his rifle wavered about everywhere. He then threw himself flat on the ground and, with an almost superhuman effort, steadied himself for a moment and fired. His aim was true, and with a terrific crash the reflector split into 1,000 fragments, and Dr. Bird staggered to his feet. Right. He's out of order for a short while, he cried. Quick, to the house while we can. As swiftly as his numb feet would allow him, he stumbled toward the house. The muzzle of his rifle again projected from the loophole, and with its crack the doctor staggered for a moment, and then fell. Walter's rifle spoke again, and the rifle disappeared through the loophole with a spasmodic jerk. Carnes stumbled his way over to the doctor. "Hey, you hit badly?" he gasped through chattering teeth. "I'm not hit at all," muttered the doctor. "I stumbled and fell just as you fired. Hey, look out, he's going to shoot again." The rifle barrel came slowly into view through the loophole. Walter fired, but his bullet missed. Carnes then threw himself behind a rock for protection. The rifle had swung in Walter's direction now, and paused. As it did so, from the house came a strangled cry and a sound of a blow. The rifle barrel disappeared, and the sounds of a struggle came from the building. "Come on now," cried Carnes as he rose to his feet, and made his way stumbling forward, the others following at the best speed which their numbed limbs would allow. As they reached the door, they became aware of a struggle which was going on inside. With all the strength he could muster, the doctor threw his massive frame against the door. It creaked, but the solid oak from which it was composed was proof against the attack, and he drew back for another onslaught. From inside the house came a pistol shot, followed by a despairing cry and a guttural roar. Joined now by Carnes, the doctor threw his weight against the door again. With a rending crash, it gave in, and they fell sprawling into the cabin. The doctor was the first one to his feet. Part 4. "Who are you?" asked a voice from one corner. The doctor whirled around like a flash and covered the speaker with his pistol. "You, hands up," he said tersely. "I'm unarmed," the voice replied. "Who are you?" "We're from the United States Secret Service," replied Carnes, who had now gained his feet. "Game is up for you, and you'd better realize that quick." "Oh, Secret Service. Oh, thank God," cried the voice. "You get Koskov. He has the plans. He's gone out through that tunnel." "Where is it?" demanded Carnes. "The entrance is that iron plate on the floor." Carnes and the doctor jumped at the plate and tried to lift it, without any result. There was no handle or projection on which they could take hold. "Oh, not that way," cried the voice. "That cover is fastened on the inside. No, go outside the building. He'll come out about 200 yards north. You gotta shoot him as soon as he appears or he'll get away." Well, the three men nearly tumbled over each other to get through the doorway into the bitter cold outside. As they emerged from the cabin, the gaze of the guide swept the surrounding hills. "Hey, there he goes." "Come on, let's get him," said Carnes sharply. Walter ran forward a few feet and dropped prone to the ground, cuddling the stock of his rifle to his cheek. 200 yards away, a figure was scurrying over the rocks away from the cabin. Walter drew in his breath, and his hand grew suddenly steady as his keen grey eyes peered through the sights. Carnes and the doctor held their breath in sympathy. Suddenly, there was a rifle shot, and the fleeing man threw up his arms and fell forward on his face. "Got him," said Walter laconically. "Right. Go and bring in the body, Carnes," exclaimed the doctor. "I'll take care of that chap inside." "Oh, did you get him?" asked the voice eagerly as the doctor stepped inside. "Well, he's dead all right," replied the doctor grimly. "Hell, who the hell are you and what are you doing here?" "Look, there's a light switch on the left of the door as you come in," was his reply. Dr. Bird found the switch and snapped on the light. He turned toward the corner from whence the voice had come, and then recoiled in horror. Propped in the corner was the body of a middle-aged man, daubed and splashed with blood which ran from a wound in the side of his head. "God damn," he said. "Here, let me help you." "There's not much use," replied the man rather faintly. "I'm done in. This face wound doesn't amount to much, but I'm shot through the body and I'm bleeding internally. If you try to move me, it'll easily kill me. Just leave me alone until your partners come back." The doctor drew a flask of brandy from his pocket and then advanced towards the corner. "Here, take a few drops of this," he advised. With an effort, the man lifted the flask to his lips and gulped down a little of the fiery spirit. A sound of trampling feet came from the outside, and then a thud as though a body had been dropped. Carnes and Walter then entered the cabin. He's as dead as a mackerel," said Carnes in answer to the doctor's look. "Walter got him through the neck and broke his spinal cord. He never knew what hit him." "And the plants?" came in a gasping voice from the man in the corner. We got them too," replied Carnes. He had both of those packets inside his coat. They've been opened, but guess they're all here. Hey, who the hell are you? "Well, since Kossoff is dead and I'm dying, there's no reason why I shouldn't tell you," was the answer. "I'll leave that brandy handy to keep up my strength. I only have a short time. I can't repeat this. Now, as to who I am or what I was, doesn't really matter. Kossoff knew me as John Smith, and that'll pass as well as any other name. Let my past stay buried. I am, or was, a scientist of some ability, but fortune frowned on me, and I was driven out of the world. Money would rehabilitate me. Money will do anything nowadays, so I set out to get it. And in the course of my experimental work, I discovered that cold was a negative heat and reacted to the laws which governed heat." "Well, I knew that," cried Dr. Bird, "but I could never prove it." "And, who are you?" demanded John Smith. "Dr. Bird, Bureau of Standards." "Bird, yeah, I've heard of you. You can understand me when I say that as heat, positive heat is a concomitant of ordinary light. I found that cold, negative heat is a concomitant of cold light. Hey, is my apparatus in good shape outside?" "The reflector is smashed." "I'm sorry. You would have enjoyed studying it. I presume that you saw that it's a catenary curve." "Yeah, I rather thought so." "It was, and it was also adjustable. I could vary the focal point from a few feet to several miles. With that apparatus, I could throw a beam of negative heat with a focal point which I could adjust it well. Close to the apparatus, I could obtain a temperature almost down to absolute zero. But at the longer ranges, it wasn't so cold due to leakage into the atmosphere. Well, even at 2 miles, I could produce a local temperature of 300 degrees below zero." "Tell me, what was the source of your cold?" "Liquid helium. Those cylinders contain, or rather they did contain, for I expect that Kossoff had to empty them. I used to have helium in a liquid state." "Hey, where's your compressor?" "I didn't have to use one. Developed a cold light under whose rays helium would liquefy and remain in a state of equilibrium until exposed to light rays. Those cylinders had merely enough pressure to force the liquid out to where the sun could hit it. Then they turned to gas, dropping the temperature at the first focal point of the reflection to absolute zero. When I had this much done, Kossoff and I packed the whole apparatus here, and we were ready for work. We were on the path of the transcontinental airmail. I bided my time until an especially valuable shipment was to be made. My plans, which worked perfectly, were to freeze the plane in midair and then rob the wreck. I heard of a jewel shipment the TAC was to carry, and I planned to get it. When the plane came over, Kossoff and I brought it down. The unsuspected presence of another plane upset us a little. I started to bring that one down, too. But we'd been all over this country, and I knew there was no place that a plane could land, so I let it go on in safety. Well, thank you for that, replied Carnes with a grimace. Well, we robbed the wreck and we found 2 packets. One, the jewels I was after, the other a sealed packet which proved to contain certain War Department plans. That was when I learned who Koskov really was. I'd hired him in San Francisco as a good mechanic who had no principles. He was to get 1/4 of the loot. When we found these plans, though, he told me who he really was. He was a Russian secret agent, and he wanted to deliver the plans to Russia. Well, I may be a thief and a murderer, but I'm not yet ready to betray my country, so I told him so. He offered me almost any price for those plans, but I wouldn't listen. We had a serious disagreement. Well, he overpowered me and bound me. We had a radio set here. He called San Francisco and sent some coded message. Think he was waiting here for someone to come. If we'd followed our original plans, we'd have been miles from here before you even arrived. He had me bound and helpless, as he thought, but I worked my bonds loose a little. I made sure not to let him know it, because I knew that the plane I had let get away would guide a party here. I thought I might be able to help out. When he came and attacked the house, I worked at my bonds until they were loose enough to throw off. I saw Kosov stop my cold apparatus to working, and then he quit because he ran out of helium. When he started shooting again, I worked my way out of my bonds, and I tackled him to the ground. Well, he was a better man than I gave him credit for, or else he suspected me. But just about the time I grabbed him, he whirled around and struck me over the head with his gun barrel, and he tore my face open. The blow stunned me. When I came to, I was thrown into this corner. I was going to have another try at it, but I guess you rushed him too fast. He turned and ran for the tunnel, but as he did so, shot me through my body. Guess I didn't look dead enough to suit him. You gentlemen broke open the door and came in. And that's about it. Oh, no, it isn't, not by a long shot, exclaimed Dr. Bird. Where is that cold light apparatus of yours? It's in the tunnel. How'd you get into it? If you open that cupboard on the wall, you'll find an open knife switch on it. Just close it. Dr. Bird found the switch, and did so. As he did, the cabin rocked on its foundations, and both Carnes and Walter were thrown to the ground. The thud of a detonation deep in the earth came to their ears. Hey, what was that? Cried the doctor. That, replied Smith with a smile, was the detonation of 200 pounds of TNT. When you dig down into the underground cave where we use the cold light apparatus, you'll find it in fragments. That was my only child, and I'll sure as hell take it with me. As he finished, his head slumped forward on his chest. With an exclamation of dismay, Dr. Bird sprang forward and tried to lift his prostrate form. Then, in annoyance, the doctor tightened his grip on the dying man's shoulder, but Smith had collapsed into a heap. Dr. Bird bent forward and tore open his shirt and listened to his chest. He then straightened up. He is gone, he said sadly. I guess the results of his genius have died with him. He doesn't strike me as a man who left too much to chance. Carnes, is that your case completed? Yeah, very satisfactorily, Doctor. I have both of the lost packets. All right, then. Come back to the wreck and help me with my burros. I can make my way back to Fallon without a guide. Where are you going, Doctor? That, Carnes, my dear friend, is none of your goddamn business. Permit me to remind you that I am on my vacation. I haven't decided yet just where I'm going, but I can tell you one thing. It's going to be somewhere where you can't call me on the phone. So there you go, my dear friends. That's episode 5 of this series, and Personally, I'm really enjoying it. I think you are too. Old school classics there. It's just as much fun in the modern day as it was back then. So yeah, I might even put them all together in one long video when they're all done. Tell me if you think that's a good idea. A lot of people like falling to sleep to the really long videos, so maybe I'll just do that. Well, that's enough for one evening. Podcast tomorrow night, and I'll be back here again on Friday. Freezing cold here. Oh my god. Minus whatever. Really icy and miserable and cold. Windy and rainy as well, so not a lot of fun here in the south of the Netherlands right now. But at least I'm safe and warm inside my house, reading these stories to you. And I hope you appreciate it. I know you do, of course you do. So, till the next time, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.